1. This happened in, I believe, July or August of 2017. My husband, my 3 daughters, and I were at the beach having a get-together with some of my extended family who lived in the area. It was a really nice time and a good connect with everyone. But after a couple of hours, my second oldest, age 13 at the time, came up to me and asked if I could take her home. I could tell by her expression and tone that she was pretty tired. She and I are both introverts, and I am sure she was less than thrilled to be spending a nice summer night with her cousins, that are all a good deal older than her. I wasn't feeling too great myself, so I found my husband and let him know that I was going to take her home, and to let our other girls know. She and I got in the car. We had brought 2 since my husband came to the beach on his own after golfing, and made the short 5-minute drive back to our house. It was only once we'd parked, gotten up to the porch and jiggled the door handle, when we realized it was locked and we didn't have a key. My husband had the main one, and the absence of our fake rock in the garden told me that my eldest daughter had once again used the spare to get inside and had left it in the house. This was all very inconvenient, but nothing that hadn't happened before, so I told my daughter to go around back and try to climb in through the huge window above the kitchen sink. While she was making her way around the house, I tried calling my husband just in case she couldn't get in, but he didn't pick up the phone. Once again, not too out of the ordinary. The reception at the beach is terrible, and he was probably busy anyway. I was in the middle of trying to call my oldest daughter, when I looked through the window next to the front door, which allows you to see through the kitchen in the back, and saw my daughter standing in the kitchen doorway. It was dark thanks to the screen, so I could only make out her silhouette, but it was definitely her. I know my daughter. She's quite short like me and has a very petite figure like my mom. I could recognize her from miles off. "Great job," I remember calling out. "Come unlock the door now." She didn't move. By the way she was standing, I could tell that she was staring right at me, but she didn't move a muscle. At first I thought maybe she was on her phone or something, but I could clearly see her arms on either side of her. She was standing in quite an odd position as well. Her feet were a good distance apart and her arms were slightly raised from her sides. I didn't feel uneasy yet, but I was very confused, as her and I continued to stare at one another for several more seconds. "Lily," I remember saying again. No more than 5 seconds after her name left my mouth, my daughter came jogging from the side of the house and up the steps, telling me she couldn't get inside because there was a screen on the kitchen window and she couldn't pry it off. I stared at my daughter, my real daughter, for multiple seconds, with what must have been a very terrified expression, because her face instantly fell and she asked me if everything was okay. I couldn't answer, and I remember feeling my whole body start to shake as I slowly looked back at the window and into the house. Maybe I imagined it. No. This thing in my house was now in the living room, still standing in that weird position and staring right at me, but now at least 10 feet closer. Fear and adrenaline shot through my veins in a way only a mother can know, and I practically yanked my daughter from those steps as we ran to the neighbor's house to get a spare key. Whatever was in my house was gone by the time we returned, or at least out of eyesight from the window, but I did not let my daughter leave the neighbor's house until I had inspected every inch to make sure there was no intruder. When I had more or less calmed down and was positive no one was inside, the whole thing started to seem more and more ridiculous as it played out in my mind. The human brain automatically tries to give everything a logical explanation, so the more I thought about it, the more I was feeling like it had been imagined. I barely even considered calling the police. What would I say to them? "Hey, officers, I saw something in my house that looked exactly like my daughter, but I don't know what it was because she was standing right next to me when it happened." Absolutely not. I eventually chalked it up to me being exhausted or whatever, because honestly, what else could it have been? The last thing I wanted to worry about was some random thing in my house, acting like the girl from The Ring. I didn't tell my daughter about my experience, I just apologized for losing it a bit, and told her I thought I saw a wasp's nest. A terrible lie, truly, but she was either too tired or didn't care enough to question it, and her and I went straight to the TV room to watch her favorite show, Criminal Minds. This was not exactly my first choice of programs after what had just happened, but if it meant getting to keep an eye on my daughter for the night, I was more than happy to oblige. I know I said I chalked it up to imagination, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that my girl was in danger. It was tormenting me for the rest of the night, and I must have checked on her at least 5 times while she was sleeping. Over 3 years later, I still think about it frequently, and it seems less and less like a terrifying daydream. I am almost positive that there was something in my house that night. Let me know your thoughts on this. Am I being dramatic? Nothing has happened since, and I never told my husband or anyone else. But it still torments me to this day. 2. I am a female, 25, and have grown up being somewhat sensitive to paranormal entities in general. I can sense when they're around, and I can feel good and bad energy. I grew up in a pretty old house. It was about 115 years old at the time. It was a 2-story Victorian in Minnesota with a dirt basement that my parents had renovated before I was born. My dad was always a skeptic when it came to ghosts, but while he would stay late renovating it, he would get the overwhelming feeling of being watched. One night while installing new kitchen cabinets, he felt eyes on him again and decided he'd had enough and said loudly, "You're going to like it when it's finished." Immediately, he felt calm and didn't have that terrible feeling after that. Once my parents moved into the house, whenever it was seemed to stick around, sometimes causing unexplained noises and such, my mom, being the curious person she is, looked into the history of the house and found a lady named Corinne had died in the house. According to rumors, Corinne had been known as a neighborhood cat lady and took in all the stray cats, and her cause of death was cat scratch fever. I have since done my own research and found no proof of this. After learning this information, my mom and dad started to, somewhat jokingly, call this ghost Corinne, assuming she was the one haunting it. One day, my dad was watching football and he had the TV on very loud. My mom yelled jokingly, "Turn that TV down or Corinne will get you." My dad laughed and said, "She can't do anything." And at that moment the TV turned off and there was a knock at the door. My dad was stunned and jumped up to open the door, but nobody was there. Keep in mind, the front door is right next to the TV in the living room, and the huge wraparound porch is also a good 6 feet off the ground. Whoever knocked would have had to go down the steps and down the driveway, all of which you could see from the front door, basically making it impossible. Right as my dad, confused, shut the door, the TV came back on. My mom said he silently walked over to the couch, sat down, and lowered the volume. When I was a bit older, my grandparents moved into the downstairs bedroom. One night my grandmother woke up to someone touching her foot. She looked up to see a woman dressed in a white nightgown walking away from the bed, go out the door and up the stairs where the rest of the family was sleeping. My whole family thinks this was Corinne. Another experience happened to me when I was 5, but it wasn't the cat lady. Instead, I woke up to a man standing in my doorway. I stared at him for a second, and I was so terrified I couldn't speak. He looked like he had a bell in his hand, but I still don't know for sure. It was really weird. I called for my dad, finally, and I watched him run into my room and go right through the intruder. I never saw that ghost again, and there wasn't a whole lot of noticeable activity from the cat lady, other than knocks, footsteps, and other boring stuff. We moved out of that house when I was about 6, so I don't have any recent stories. However, in 2011, my family moved to Maryland, where my parents' families are. One night, we spent the night at my uncle's house. His house is pretty old, but he also collects antiques, so there's always a creepy feeling to it. Not bad, not good, just creepy. My parents were sleeping in the guest bedroom upstairs while my sister, who was 11 at the time, and I had to sleep in the living room downstairs. From the living room, we could see the bottom of the stairs and across to the library, which has always had a creepy vibe. And right around the corner was the kitchen. It was around midnight, and my sister and I were half awake, when suddenly we heard noises from the kitchen. This person was moving pots around, opening cabinets and drawers, walking around as if they were making a 3-course dinner. But there was one problem: the lights were off everywhere in the house. We would have seen lights in the kitchen if they were on. We would have heard someone coming down the stairs, but it was completely dark. I whispered to my sister, "Do you hear that?" She just softly said yes. And that was it. We both just kind of tried to sleep as if nothing happened. I really don't know why we both did that. Thinking back on it, it's really terrifying. It went on for a good 20 minutes of cabinets opening and closing, pots and pans rattling, and footsteps moving around. It stopped eventually, and we slept through the night without any more events. In the morning, I woke my sister up and asked her if she remembered anything, and she said she did and relayed the events. I had to make sure it wasn't a dream, and we both still remember this happening. My grandmother lived with my uncle for a bit after my grandfather died, and she would constantly hear footsteps going up and down the stairs and noises in the kitchen. So it's a pretty active house. Jump to 2013. My parents got divorced, so I lived with my mom most of the time. She rented a townhouse that was fairly new, nothing creepy about it, but I could feel an energy in my bedroom. It wasn't evil. I could just tell something was there. One morning around 5 a.m., I woke up and saw a shadow of a man standing over me. He had a top hat, Abe Lincoln, on, and I could tell he was staring at me. I blinked a couple of times and he was still there. I covered my face with a blanket and waited a while. When I peeked out again, he wasn't there. I got out of bed and ran to my mom's room. I told her what I had seen, and she didn't even look surprised. She said that the owner of the house's sick husband had died in my room. She hadn't told me because she didn't want to freak me or my sister, who I shared the room with, out. My sister never saw anything in that room, and that was the only time I saw him. I still don't know what the top hat was about. So yeah, those are the most exciting stories in my family. Others include my uncle's house being haunted by the killed-in-action U.S. soldier that grew up there. And my other uncle, I have 3, they all have haunted houses, whose ghost liked to sing to my cousin when she was a baby, and drag furniture across the floor. 3. I live in pretty much the middle of Nebraska. A lot of back roads and woods. The other night I went out for a drive after dark, as that was normal for me when I felt bored. I went straight north of the town I live in and kept going after hitting gravel. I grew up in this area, so I know it really well. About 5 minutes into my trip, I got one of my trees stuck in a gravel mud mix. After a while of struggling, I got out and checked. Something didn't feel right the moment I got out of my car. As if I wasn't alone. Keep in mind, I'm decently out in the middle of nowhere with no houses around. Kind of was just silence with an eerie feeling. I got back in my car, and kept trying to get unstuck, eventually being successful, and got back on the road. That's when things started getting really strange. Every road seemed the same no matter which way I turned. Keep in mind I grew up around here, I remember these roads. I keep driving and driving, trying to hit pavement, but it just wasn't happening. When trying to pull up Google Maps, my phone showed no service, and calling wouldn't go through. Every intersection I was trying to find signs which were not there when they normally are. Everything just felt wrong. My compass built in my car was the only thing I really had to guide me, which went south since I knew I was north of town. Started going south, and that's when it happened. I swear I hear someone or something run straight into my car. Pretty tall, noticeable figure, and heard a very loud thud. Something just seemed really off, and my gut feeling was to not stop. So I didn't, and booked it out of that area with the worst feeling, and the feeling of something was very, very wrong. The roads still all looked the same. Finally, I crossed a bridge over a tiny creek after what felt like forever of driving straight, and my phone service came back. I checked Google Maps, and somehow I was still on the same road I started on, which made no sense because of all my turns. Also, that road doesn't show it goes straight for as long as I felt I was driving on it. I was in tears, and the horrible feeling was starting to fade. I don't know what happened that night, but I really don't want to experience that again. Also, I should mention, when my car gets stuck, mud cakes all up on the wheel well. That was not the case. The car was clean, like I never even got stuck. The car showed no sign of being hit either. My car's body is super easy to dent, especially if something really hit it that loud. And yes, I was sober and drug-free, and no, I don't take meds or have any mental and health conditions. Figured I'd clear that up. 4. Even though I developed insomnia at 14, all those years lying awake in bed never led to a single experience like the ones I had frequently as an adult. My mental health began taking a downward trend just before my 18th birthday, and by the time I was 19, I was entertaining all kinds of dark, self-harming thoughts. Bedtime became a huge point of anxiety for me, not only because I knew I was going to lie there alone with my thoughts for hours, but because as the months went on, I believed this unhealthy state of mind allowed evil spirits to torment me. I simply was not stronger than these attackers. I could not force myself to be peaceful and ignore the feelings and thoughts they implanted in me. Still, I was too stubborn to ask for help, which only made the situation worse. Finally, one night, I was attacked so strongly by these unseen forces that I could not move, could not pray, could not even cry. Understand that this was not sleep paralysis. I was fully awake, rigidly awake. There was no way I could fall asleep when I felt this frightening presence near me. My friend was staying the night, and even though she lay inches away from me, I could not ask her for help. I lay there frozen for what could easily have been hours until suddenly my dad rushed into my room. "Do you need me to pray for you?" he whispered. I reached for his hand and nodded. "I had a dream about you, and I knew I had to come and check on you." So he prayed for me, and I was left tired but safe, and I fell asleep only minutes after he left. Because of this seeming miracle, I realized how beneficial it was to ask for help with my mental health. I began to do so, and I improved gradually until I found myself free of the self-harming urges. The insomnia was still there, but it wasn't scary anymore. If I ever felt those dark presences again, I now somehow had the strength to either tell my dad or to pray out loud, which was always enough to break whatever was happening to me. Before the spell broke, for lack of a better phrase, it was like my room was filled with overwhelming white noise, similar to the sound of blood rushing in your ears. But the moment I could speak up, sometimes all I could do was whisper Jesus. Everything would go quiet, like a rainstorm just suddenly stopping. It was not a physical noise, but I hope you understand the comparison. These next two encounters are less profound, but you may find them spookier and more entertaining. They can be taken with a grain of salt because I was in a sleepy state, but let me assure you that they felt real. One morning before dawn, I dreamed that I was lying in bed and opened my eyes to see a tall figure standing over me. His head was a black bird-like skull, similar in size and shape to the masks the bubonic plague doctors wore. He wore a brown robe tied with a rope, like a monk's habit. In fear I woke up, only to still sense someone next to me. I opened my eyes, but I could see nothing in the dark. There was no way I was going to even reach for my lamp or phone for fear I would touch that being. So I just began to pray until I fell back asleep. Later I asked my family if one of them had come into my room that morning, but all of them said they hadn't. My most recent encounter was the most vivid of all because it was during sleep paralysis. It was the only time I've ever had sleep paralysis, and I hope it never happens again. I was dreaming that there were animals crawling around my room, cute ones, not evil ones, when I suddenly realized that the sounds I was hearing were real. I heard footsteps on the carpet getting closer to me, and I heard the unmistakable rustling of someone brushing up against my beanbag chair. At this point, the paralysis had kicked in, so the most I could do was flutter my eyelids open, and I saw nothing in my room. Now I was getting a little uneasy. Then I felt a hand grip my shoulder. It was firm, but not hard or even that scary. In fact, I thought it was my mother's hand. It felt almost exactly like hers, perhaps a little bonier. I forced my eyelids to crack open again for a second, hoping to see her. There was nothing. My heart rate rocketed, and I tried to fall back in my habit of whispering Jesus. I could still feel the hand. I realized that I hadn't said it out loud, that I couldn't say it out loud. I fought and fought as hard as I could for around 10 seconds. The hand wasn't going away. Finally, somehow, the paralysis subsided, and I was able to speak. Immediately, the hand disintegrated. I didn't feel the hand let go. It only disappeared. And so did that white noise, rushing rainstorm sound. These experiences are the closest things I've ever had to supernatural occurrences. Whether you believe them to be caused by real spirits or not, I still hope my account sent a shiver down your spine. Stay safe out there, folks. 5. I've been sitting on this for a bit for a few reasons. It is really long. I wanted to be able to gather facts to support my story, and quite frankly, I didn't want to type it up while in my house. I've been engulfed in the grey of this world since I was a child. Until recently, I've never met someone who is as sensitive as me. It was enlightening and equally terrifying. So here is my story. I've been renting my house from a family member for several years now. Since day one, I knew it was haunted. I could feel the energy change the moment I stepped inside, but I could also tell it wasn't necessarily negative. I'm not a stranger to the paranormal, so when little things would happen, like items moving or going missing, inaudible conversations in other rooms, or even my dog looking at an empty corner or wall, I wouldn't usually react. I even nicknamed the ghost Bernadette and would jokingly ask her and it to stop. However, within the last 6 months, the activity has intensified. I have had individuals in my house who are complete skeptics, but they have witnessed glasses thrown across the room and shatter everywhere. Pictures falling from the wall, something and someone walking down the empty hallway, hearing it, and hearing people talking that weren't there. I even had to have my brother check that my gas alarm was still active because of the random areas in my house smelling like rotten eggs. Halloween night, I had a very small get-together, 6 people. One of my guests brought her wife, who I had only met one other time. While my friends were playing games and passing out candy, my friend's wife Emily pulled me to the side, seemingly upset, and stated she needed to discuss something with me. She first asked if I knew about Mary. I'm running names through my head that my coworker had mentioned, and I've never heard of a Mary. I obviously tell her no, and she proceeds to tell me a very detailed story about my house. She explained that I had 3 spirits in my house, a spirit named Mary, a spirit named Franklin, and that I had a spirit who is always with me named Gary, she thinks. She stated Mary had died in the house a long time ago. Franklin had died on the land before Mary from a plowing accident, and was still in his death state. She also confirmed my suspicions of extra activity. A few nights prior, in the middle of the night, I was in bed and jumped up from my sleep from a huge bang against my bedroom wall and a picture falling onto the end of the bed. Obviously, I was startled and especially spooked when I could see the indentation in my wall from what appeared to be something that had hit it. I jokingly said, "Not cool, Bernadette," and went back to bed. Emily knew about this. She knew it had hit my wall and said it was Franklin's way of trying to get my attention. That's when things are thrown in the house or far off the wall. That is Franklin. Apparently he is angry because I don't react. In my mind at this moment I'm thinking, who the hell is this woman? I do not know her and I haven't told anything to her wife about my creepy house. I'm open with my experiences in Reddit, but I'm very hush-hush in person because of others' reactions. So I ask, how do you know this stuff? and her response still as I'm typing this chills me to my bones. Because he is standing right behind you. My first reaction is to look behind me, nothing. Second reaction is to ask why I can't see him. He doesn't want me to. Third reaction is, why does he want to scare me? He wants attention. Since that night, the activity in my previously mildly creepy house has been off the charts. I don't get spooked easily. I have seen things that you see in horror movies, but my house is scary. The energy has shifted. I feel like I am constantly on fight-or-flight mode. I'm typing this at work because I feel like someone is constantly looking over my shoulder. And I don't want whatever or whoever it is to read this. I sound crazy. It's just my dog and me in the house, and even he has been acting differently. I've caught him multiple times sitting in the hall looking at nothing, whimpering, and then he runs under the bed. I literally have to drag him out. When I'm changing clothes or taking a shower, I feel uncomfortable because I feel someone is watching me. The house is nearly unbearable to live in at the moment, and I've been at a loss of how to make it go back to my mildly spooky house. I've used my sage twice now, and I think it just pisses Franklin off. With that being said, I have amazing friends and connections to the historical site in my town. With some research, I found Mary and some other interesting details. Mary Frank, 48, died suddenly in my house on August 26, 1919, from neuralgia. Her spouse, Charles Frank, held the funeral in my house. I haven't been able to find Franklin yet. However, before the Franks occupied my house, it was a stable for horses. It could be a huge coincidence that Mary's last name is Frank, and maybe Emily didn't get a clear message. I'm honestly not sure. I have asked her since, and she still thinks his name is Franklin. She has even come back to my house and told him to stop. He won't listen. I do plan to keep researching the area for a man named Franklin, but I'm not sure there will be any documentation. Another interesting thing is that I do and did know a Gary, and he's actually been brought up before. Gary was my mother's best friend's husband, who passed away from a heart attack when I was young. At the time, we lived on 20-plus acres of land, and he loved to go hunting on our property. When he passed, it was his wishes to have his ashes spread on our land. I was told many years ago that Gary watched over me. I know the activity in my house is increasing. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe because I'm more aware now, but I don't feel in danger. I never have. Because I know Gary is there. Now from multiple sources. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 215. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you yourself have a story you'd like me to use, then please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. That's kingofthecities@gmail.com, whether it's for paranormal or any one of the other types of videos I may do. Alright, let's see. This will go up on Friday. Gotta get down on Friday. That'll be the 20th. Oh, Black Friday. Yeah, the sales apparently start then. Allegedly. And, Right, so tomorrow will be Saturday. There'll likely be a gaming stream of some sort on Saturday. Not sure what form it will take, but we'll sit down and we'll chill and we'll have a bit of a chitty-chat, eh? Okay, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.